I've had so many great guests on Inner Circle podcasts, and it's always great to go back and revisit some of the best interviews. One is with Don Roeser, better known as Buck Dharma, lead guitarist and one of the founders of the band Blue Oyster Cult. This is an interview done for podcast 227 back in 2018. Buck wrote and did the lead vocals on the band's best-known hits, including Don't Fear the Reaper, Godzilla, and Burning for You. During the interview, we talked about the early days of the band when it was known as Soft White Underbelly, his best studio experiences, the evolution of his home studio, and much more. I originally spoke with Buck via Skype from his home in New York. I really want to go back and talk to you about some of the contrasts in your career, especially like when you first started. So can you tell me like some of the gigs that you guys did as Soft White Underbelly, the band that eventually became Blue Oyster Cult?
Sure. The gestation of the Underbelly was in Stony Brook, basically around Stony Brook University. None of us attended Stony Brook, but that's where Sandy Perlman had graduated. Sandy being our mentor, manager, and lyricist in the beginning. And it was meeting Sandy that sort of convinced me to give professional music a try. I don't think I really would have had a plan otherwise, but that's the way it started. And we survived. We bought our peanut butter and jelly and bread in the early days by playing gigs at Stony Brook with dances at Stony Brook. And we did that because Sandy's friend, Howie Klein, would hire us for these appearances. We also opened up some of the concerts there. And of course, Howie Klein later went on to start 415 Records and then become the head of Sire and retiring a wealthy fellow.
Yeah, right.
Later. But at that time, he was the head of the whatever they called the social board that had controlled the budget and the hiring of entertainment acts. So anyway, he'd throw us like a $250 gig every month or so, or 6 weeks or so, and we survived on that basically.
Were you playing like clubs and things like that?
No, we didn't really play clubs until we basically failed the Soft White Underbelly, and we needed to play clubs just to survive. And then we did spend about a year and a half between the Underbelly and the eventual evolution into Blue Oyster Cult playing. We did play club dates, and we played a lot of copy material. And that had the benefit of sort of honing the band's performance skills a little bit too,
Yeah, I remember those days where there were plenty of clubs to play, and of course, that's where you got good back in those days. It was the farm team, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we were sort of good as a psychedelic band, and whatever you would call what the Underbelly was, but I couldn't say that we were polished in a aggressive or commercial or entertainment sense, But obviously the early days of the Underbelly and the music that was recorded, I don't know, have you ever heard that music?
I don't think so.
It was those we were signed to Elektra as the Underbelly, and we did about almost 2 albums worth of stuff. And during that time, the original singer Les Bronstein departed, and Eric Bloom replaced him. And so there's some recordings with Les on vocals, and there's recordings with Eric on vocals.
Wow!
And we thought that they had just been well. The problem is that Elektra had a falling out with Sandy, and just decided to, eat the expense that they had in us and not release the music. So we thought that they were gone because Elektra went through a couple of mergers and sales, and who knows what happened all that. But anyway, it turns out they still had the tapes, and Rhino put them out, I guess, it must have been the early 90s or late 80s, sometime around then. They made about 3,500 copies of it or something. I don't know if it's still available anywhere. It might be. Maybe you could stream it. I don't know.
What was that like to go back and listen after all these years?
It holds up to my ear. I think it's really good stuff, and it's definitely unique. We neither the Blue Oyster Cult or the Underbelly really sounded like anybody else. And certainly at the time of the Underbelly was a wonderful time of creative output in the music business. Bands were just coming out of every direction, and they all sounded different. They all had a point of view. It was really, really nice. It was a good time to be alive and listening and making music.
Well, speaking of creating music, let's talk about writing songs, because there are a few people that are really good right off the bat, but most of us have to learn, and it takes a long time. So what was the evolution of you guys writing?
It was a unique experience for us to begin that, but again, we had some excellent and potent, I think, lyrical input from Sandy Pearlman and Richard Meltzer, and we very much kind of just pounded out the arrangements in rehearsal. In those days, this preceded multi-track tape recorders being available to the musician, and not just the big studio, but even the big studios only had 4-track in those days. So we would rehearse constantly. We had a band house, and we would just basically rehearse all day long and work out these arrangements. And Sandy would listen to it and make suggestions. He was an odd fellow. He passed away last year.
Yeah.
Sadly, yeah. But he knew so much about music and had a feeling for music, although he wasn't particularly musical himself. He could, I don't know if he could ever sing in tune, or, even his rhythm wasn't that good. But boy, he just, as far as the cerebral end of what popular music was, and having his finger on the pulse of the emerging album scene, he was just phenomenally talented. And that's how we sort of learned to do it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What was your first experience in the studio like?
My first experience, I didn't have to worry at all about the technical end of it.
Yeah.
You just come in, you set up your amplifier, and the engineer puts a mic on it, and then you go. And it was a thrill. It was great. And our first experiences happened because Sandy was able to get demo time from several labels. We did a demo for Mercury. We did a demo for Columbia early on. We did a demo for Elektra before we made those, before we were signed. And so we actually got some New York City studio experience by doing that. And of course, you start to, you grok and osmose the creative process and how it's done, the technical end of it, So it was, it's great. I've always loved being in the studio.
When you guys first started, was it in the time of 8-track or was it 16-track?
No, it was the time of 4-track.
Oh, 4.
3-track, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Our first album for Columbia, Blue Oyster Cult, self-titled, that was recorded in a jingle studio that was owned by David Lucas and his partner, Tom McFall, Lucas McFall. And they were one of the prominent jingle houses in New York at that time. And we had met David at a party upstate New York. And he said, come on down and we'll do something. So that first record was recorded as a master purchase when we signed with CBS. After that, we had to record in CBS studios, but the first record was done in David's studio on a Scully 8-track, and he had the first 8-track in New York City.
Yeah.
Of course, I guess, everybody followed suit pretty soon, but that was the first 1-inch 8-track.
That was the machine that I learned on, a Scully 8-track and an MCI 416.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first album was 8-track, and then I think we went 16 after that. And then, of course, we went 24 eventually.
So you guys, you started in an era, wonderful era, where you're used to playing live in the studio.
Yeah, we always did basics live. Of course, we did overdubs, but we tried to do as many as the instruments on the basics as we could.
And is that right up until today?
Yeah, I would say we've played click tracks and not the click tracks, and we've done it every way you could do it, pretty much.
Okay, well, that leads me to the question that you've done a lot of different ways. You've seen the technology change. You've changed with it when you had to. And you have an overview of this, as I do. What do you feel most comfortable with when it comes to recording? Is there a way that just seems like it works, and is it a way that you think that everybody should work, or it just works for you?
Yeah, well, if you listen to what's popular today, it bears almost no resemblance to the way we recorded.
Yeah.
Unless it's an artist that like that. I mean, there are artists that are still making music in real time and on a collaborative basis, but most of it is here. It sounds like it's all done by a keyboard player.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Not to say that it doesn't have merit, but it doesn't have a lot of pull for me. You hear the occasional real piece of creativity or novelty, but the genres of popular music today just don't really do it for me.
Now, that being said, everything goes in a trend, so hopefully that will come back soon, back around. I keep my fingers crossed on that.
Yeah, well, it seems like the spectrum of what's out there and what's popular, even to young people today, is really varied. And certainly a lot of young people like roots music, real music, acoustic music, all the traditional stuff that was basically the only thing out there when I was coming up.
Yeah, right. You were into home recording early.
Well, when we first started recording, we had a Sony stereo machine, and that's how we would document what we were up to.
Uh-huh.
And then, of course, the TAC 4-tracks are the first accessible multi-track machine that in our day.
Yeah.
And that really changed the way we wrote and arranged also, because the writer at home could basically flesh out an arrangement with overdubs and then bring a more coherent and closer to finished arrangement to the band before the band ever got a hold of it.
Okay, how did that sit with the band? Because there are some bands that feel, oh, wait a second, when you do that, you're not allowing any of my creativity to seep in.
Yeah, it's not as if the demos were slavishly obeyed, because they would evolve from there.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely moved the composition into a more formalized conception, based on the author's original conception compared to the old days. But we all had the machines and we all did it, so we didn't mind doing it.
Yeah.
We thought having a multi-track in your house was just the most wonderful thing.
Yeah. I didn't have a TAC. I had a decoder.
Yeah. I had a TAC, and the rest of the guys had decoders, although they eventually got TX.
Yeah. It was a better machine for sure.
Yeah.
So how did your home studio evolve then?
I've always had a place to work. Moved a lot of times in my life, and I've never had what I would consider to be a full-on release grade studio, except maybe for today. I'm confident that anything I do in the room I'm in now could go out, and withstand sonic scrutiny.
That's pretty cool that you could say that.
Yeah, well, what I've done, the only thing I've done is I have a space, and I got a professional acoustical consultant to design some materials, which I then procured and put up, and the room sounds great. It really does.
Yeah, that's the big key. Getting the room to sound good. It's not the gear. Then again, you've had so much experience in the studio already that, let's face it, it's not the gear, it's the knowledge behind it. It's not the hammer, it's how you swing it, so to speak.
I guess, yep. I mean, I really enjoy the engineering side, but I'm definitely an amateur. I just don't do it. I don't put enough hours in it to be a real expert at it. The pro audio engineers just work so fast, and they know what works and what doesn't. Where I'm always experimenting and trying to come up with something on my own.
Was there one recording experience where you walked away and thought, wow, I really learned a lot from that?
I learned a lot working with Martin Birch. And Martin Birch, the producer of Iron Maiden, and he was. We did 2 records with him, and he was very generous with his engineering knowledge, and he taught me a lot about how to just doing what real competent pro AEs do. Just get it done. They know how to do it. They like to experiment too, but they always know how to get it on tape. So that's good.
Was his approach any different from the guys that we worked with in New York?
Yeah. Obviously, when we recorded at the CBS studios, the staff engineers were totally competent, and they make records day in and day out for Columbia. But Martin definitely had a more rock approach than those guys. It just had more of an attitude. Martin did the Fireland and Origin record and the Cultosaurus record. They definitely have a sound that's different than the rest of our catalog.
What did he do exactly? I'm very familiar with Martin. I love his work, but I've never really heard a lot about him and how he worked. Can you fill me in?
Well, he's an engineer producer. He does everything.
Yeah.
And he basically knows what he wants, and he's getting it on the way in, into the machine. And that's a great skill to have. So he's already thinking about how the finished product is. And I'm sure, a lot of people from that era work that way. Anybody who puts up a mic or a preamp or compressors on the way in, they know what they're going for. Otherwise you wouldn't do it. You wouldn't commit at that point. But that's the way it was historically. You would commit to right from the recording light going on. You would commit to what you knew it was going to end up as.
I wrote a book with Ken Scott, one of the 5 Beatle engineers. In doing so,
he's awesome, Ken Scott.
He is. And he told me a lot about, in writing the book, about the Abbey Road culture, the EMI culture. It was funny because they were limited in what they had when we look back, and yet they did so much with it, and it sounded so good. And here we are today with unlimited choices, and often it doesn't sound like that. We can't get close to it. It makes you wonder, what are we missing here?
Yeah. I think it could be the acoustics, the sound of rooms, because that's how they basically corralled the music in the old days, right? They made a room that sounded good, and they had the best gear they could, and the rounding of transients from the mediums and the gear was pleasing to the ear.
Yeah, for sure. So what's in your studio now, gear-wise?
I've got a Macintosh-based DAW, and my main DAW is Digital Performer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I've got a small amount of outboard gear. I've got some clones of LA2As, and I got some Pultec clones, the new Clark Technic Pultecs. Got a neat flavored preamp and some solid state pre's. I use metric halo interfaces in a ULN8. I know I got some other ones. I got 11176 clone, and I've got a Kemper for guitar, which I use mostly now, even though I've got amplifiers and stuff. I find the Kemper is really, really good for the purpose, and I'm happy with the way it sounds.
Are you using it live as well?
No, it's not that I wouldn't, but I haven't committed to doing that yet. I still like to have most of our, we do about 70% fly dates now, when we just go across the country and play on a rented backline. And I typically spec Marshall JCM 900s and I use that. But I use that with a 2 notes torpedo load box and impulse response generator.
Hmm.
So my cabinet and mic sound is the same every night, and that's what front of house gets, and that's what my in-ears get.
Wow.
Even though I use a monitor cabinet on stage too.
Yeah. I saw somewhere that the guys from Metallica are touring with, I'm not sure if it's Kempers or Axe Effects, but it made me wonder, it was like, wow, if you guys have given up your, well, they were boogie guys, I guess. If you guys have given that up and gone to modelers, wow, what does that say about the state of amplification these days?
Yeah, well, it's the stuff's good these days. What can I say?
Yeah.
And we did a bunch of European festivals, big festivals last year, and I was astounded how many of the metal acts were using either Kempers or Axe Effects.
Really? The metal guys?
Yeah, yep, yep.
Wow. It's a different world. I have a friend that's a exec VP at one of the major amplifier companies, and he keeps on regaling me with stories about how the business is getting worse and worse. And even on a small scale, you know, the little $100 amplifiers, student amplifiers, we're just getting away from it. It's not something that guitar players think about these days. Unlike the way it used to be where, you know, that was so much a big part of your sound and you spent so much time, like the perfect wave, trying to get the perfect amplifier.
Right. And in the early Blue Oyster Cult days, we used to get, you know, if there's a new stack amplifier, we buy it. You know, we had Stramps, we had the Boogies, we had the Music Men, we had Marshalls, we had High Watts, we tried everything. You know.
Wow. What was your favorite?
The JCM 800 was great, although that was before master volume or anything like that. And you know, I'm a short guy, and I used to stand in front of a stack and just deafen myself. And we were opening shows too, so we'd have about 10 feet from the lip of the stage back to the next amp, the next axe gear. So that was rough. Didn't really think about it at the time, but you know, I'd like to have those ear cells back. You know.
How's your hearing these days?
Yeah, it's I've got a dip at 4K, you know, and I've got you know, tinnitus pretty much all the time, but I probably don't hear any worse than anybody else my age.
Yeah, I'm lucky like that too. It's not terrible like other people. Gee, I have a friend that was an iron worker, and he's far worse than I am. You know, so just goes to show you. How do you find touring now? I mean, you've done it for so long.
Yeah.
And touring has become a real business now. It's different than the way it was. It was a business then, but you know, now it's down to a science almost. So how do you find it these days?
Well, you're right. You know, touring is mainly the way, you know, the band supports itself. You know, I could probably survive on royalties, but I like to play, and the band likes to play, and the band is great these days. And traveling gets worse and worse, and like we're doing this model of mostly fly dates, and we work mostly weekends. We go back and forth, and ironically, we net more income now than we did when we were playing arenas. So, but of course, that's because we had a big production and 3 buses and 3 trucks and all that stuff. And we don't do that anymore.
Yeah, sure.
But as far as playing goes, just love it. I enjoy it, and I think as long as it's good, I could do it indefinitely. You know, but if for any reason I couldn't do it, I couldn't sing or I couldn't play, I'd walk away and bow out. But in the meantime, it's a lot of fun. You know, it's a job, of course, but it's a good job.
Yeah. Once upon a time, fly dates was what everybody wanted because it was so much easier. But you know what? Flying is harder than it's ever been, I think. And that takes so much out of you. It's almost better to be in a bus. I think it's more relaxing.
Yeah. We do buses. Like we were in Europe for 18 days. We did a bus. We're going to go to UK for 8 days in February of 2019, and we'll do a bus. But we don't do enough, you know, what do you call a tour, you know, where it's all booked in advance. We we do dates where we get good offers, and if you have to fly to get there, then that's what we do.
Yeah, sure. What's the most fun thing that you do these days in music?
I like to just play acoustic guitar and sing. That's fun. Although it's all fun. I love playing the band's repertoire. Fortunately, Blue Oyster Cult's got a really deep and varied repertoire of nifty songs.
Yeah.
I won't get tired of playing the band's music. It's good. And also, we don't play stuff exactly like the record. We never have, and we probably never will. There's a lot of improvisation in the way we do it. And that keeps it interesting for us because we have to entertain ourselves.
Was that always kind of built into it? Did you know you're going to do that, or did it just kind of happen?
Personally, I've always liked to improvise, on lead breaks and not so much the arrangements, but certainly the solo sections.
Mm-hmm.
I've always done that, and to this day, and like a lot of bands that have been doing it a long time, or artists, sometimes you evolve an arrangement, change it, do it on the fly. You play with different people, and it sounds a little different, but it's always coherent as far as putting the song across. I don't think the song ever suffers for the changes.
You know what? It's funny because as an audience member, I never felt that when I heard the band, actually. What I'm going to say is, as an audience member, sometimes there are certain things that I miss from the record when I'll listen to it. And it might be a riff. It might be like an interesting fill. Sometimes it's even a bass line, a bass fill or something. It's like, oh, God, I missed that. I've never felt that with Blue Oyster Cult, though. Now that you mention it, when you do vary things, it's like I never felt that I missed something in particular. So whatever you're doing, it's working.
That kind of validates what we're trying to do then, if you feel that way, because, there's certain bands that do play just like the record, and Boston comes to mind. We do shows at Boston usually a couple of times each summer, and they sound just like the record. And like what you're going to hear, and you hear it, and they do a very nice job of replicating, those classic recordings, but it's really no different any night. And I don't think I could, do that, and I don't think I would like to do that, put it that way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's funny because I think back to my early days, and I'm sure you did this too, when you're playing cover material in clubs. And after a while, you get so bored. It's like, oh, I can't do this anymore. And I guess it'd be the same thing no matter what music you're playing.
The first time I heard cover bands that actually did like really good covers, I was very impressed. And there's a certain pride and talent in doing that. And that was when I went to college in upstate New York. There was several bands up there that really did excellent jobs of covering the records and sounding just like them. But beyond that accomplishment, at some point you have to go your own way and make your own sound and your own music.
Now, the only thing I can say for that is, if you're sharp and you're really thinking about it, while you're playing covers, you're learning a lot about arrangement. You're learning a lot about production.
Indeed.
If you're not thinking about it, you can just go through the motions and it won't sink in. But if you are thinking about it, you're pulling it apart and putting it back together again. That's invaluable in terms of production experience. So, that's the cool part of it.
Yeah, I would agree. And then there's bands like Captain Beefheart, It's magic band.
Yeah, right.
I just watched the clip. I just happened to surf into a clip on YouTube yesterday, and it was just refreshing to, hear what they were doing in 1972.
Yeah. Well, that almost makes me want to go look for a clip like that, as a matter of fact.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was like it was a German TV show that had 3 songs on it. The songs are like 10 minutes each. It was quite hilarious and refreshing to see it.
I'd like to see the one where they were on Saturday Night Live. And I think that's the one episode they never show on TV again.
Really?
Yeah.
I missed that.
Everybody did, I think, unless you saw it when it went down. Anyway, last question, Don. You've been in the business for a long time, and you've gone through the ups and downs of not only the band, but band business. What's the best piece of business advice that either someone imparted to you or you learned along the way?
I was completely like a total novice and not very sophisticated about business at any point in my career. I barely know how to do anything in the business realm, but certainly I think we made a lot of mistakes. Sandy Pearlman was a brilliant strategist in terms of music, but he wasn't a very good businessman. And, I think we made some bad deals along the way. Certainly, I don't know how it is today, but the record companies' contracts are all favorably stacked in the record company's favor. And you wind up paying for every bit of expense, even though they're giving you the advance to make records. And you're the last person to make a buck, and everyone just wants to dip into the grosses of the earnings of recording artists. So I don't know. I think probably artists coming up today are a lot more savvy about the business than we were. So even though I've been there a long time, I'm probably not as hip as the current people that are making big money today. They probably know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, it's the attorneys too. The new generation of attorneys are a lot hipper than I think everybody was back then. There are a few that knew what they were doing, but I never had one of those guys, unfortunately, when I needed them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really complaining. I'm not rich, but I'm not starving either. I'll always be comfortable. So
yeah,
I'm actually count my blessings as far as what's happened in my life and being able to be an artist professionally for almost 50 years.
It's quite an accomplishment. Not many people can say that, that's for sure. At the level you've been doing it at as well, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, well, I think history has been pretty kind to us as far as our legacy recordings and our, reputation. So the fact that we're still good playing, is kind of makes it sort of easy for us.
What's even better is the reputation continues to grow with time. As compared to other artists where that doesn't happen, I mean, with you guys, I think the esteem grows over time here, which is cool.
Yeah, I think we were not overpraised at any point. So I think there's still room to be appreciated, rather than, everybody's sick of you at this point.
Thanks for listening and being in my inner circle. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to questions@BobbyOwsinski.com. You can also learn about all the latest in music, audio, and production news when you sign up for my newsletter at BobbyOwsinski.com. There you'll also find out about openings for my latest online classes and special events. That's BobbyOwsinski.com. To listen to other episodes of Bobby Owsinski's Inner Circle, go to BobbyOwsinski.com and select the podcast tab, or go to BobbyOInnerCircle.com, or you can find it in Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Mixcloud, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, TuneIn Radio, Radio Public, and Podbean. At BobbyOwsinski.com and BobbyOInnerCircle.com, you'll also find a sign-up form for my newsletter and for alerts for new podcasts. This is Bobby Owsinski. I will see you next time.